Hello and welcome to another episode of the DigiTeacher Digest. This week I'd like to look at the whole question of whether or not to set examinations in computer literacy. So computer applications technology, ICTs, the kind of subject where you are working on particular applications such as databases, spreadsheets, words, or things like coding and robotics. I've been teaching grade 8 and 9 ICTs, coding and robotics for a number of years, and I'd done away with the examination. We used to have it before, but I found that some students would totally panic. So they would fall apart during the examinations and they would have so many technical problems largely of their own making, I have to say. So occasionally there are issues with licenses or account profiles on the network and so on. But these were mistakes that elementary mistakes that students were making, which was preventing them from submitting any files at the end of the exam. So they might have handed in 1 or 2 questions only and getting really low marks. So if we look at this example, a student has uploaded a database, and the question was very much about adding queries to the database and creating a report. And you can see here in the screenshot in the feedback comments that no report was attached and that only a single query was created, and there were no criteria in that query. So essentially the student has got 1 out of the possible 11 marks on the rubric for this particular question. And what went wrong? This is a student who during term time managed to do database queries fine, no problem. So what went wrong? By the way, setting exams and being able to have them marked online is for digital submissions is really, really great. These are set up as different assignments on teams, each one with a rubric. It allows you to give feedback, as you saw on the last screen, and to record the mark, and you've got a grade book you can download with all the marks recorded on it. So absolutely fantastic way of working. And you can see that the student has kind of done okay. In terms of the class average, she is well below average, particularly with that exam challenge number 2 question. You can see that you can set a range of different applications, a range of different programs, and it works really well. But there is that question of what happened in that one question that she did so badly in. Now I know that this happens in other subjects as well. You know, teachers marking a paper will come across a blank question 2 and think, what the hell happened here? So I'm not saying that this is unique to computer applications technologies, to ICT exams. But I think it is problematic that you could have a technical issue, something that is beyond the student's ability to control, and they just simply don't raise the issue. So we have, I have technicians on standby. If there is a problem with the network, with their particular profile, with the licensing of the package, IT is available to come and help. But what happens if a student does not come forward and say that they're having a problem? They may be well capable of doing that particular task, but may mess it all up for a very stupid reason. Either technical problems that they don't report, or, for example, trying to save a database, save a copy of a database, not know where the database goes to, not being fully aware of where they're saving it to. And while this is a good kind of measure of your general IT skills, being able to save a program and know where you're saving that document to, I think is a valid thing to assess. It does worry me where you get students who totally bomb out. And yet it is very useful to have an examination session. And one of the reasons I think that it is so useful to have an exam session for computer skills is because in many ways it becomes a little bit too easy. I mean, this sounds a little bit ridiculous, but during the course of a term, when students are working on computer projects, they can turn to someone sitting next to them and get help. They can ask the teacher a question, and of course I'm going to help them. And if you are a conscientious student, then you can quite easily get 100% in a computer skills exam. I always liken computer skills a bit to to a driving test. There's no rocket science there. You know exactly what it is that you will have to do in any project, and if you care about it and if you seek the help, you can make sure that you meet every aspect of the brief and can get 100% on any rubric. And I think it would be very unfair to try and make tasks more difficult simply because students are doing really well. So I don't want to discourage students and penalize them by setting little tricks and not crediting them with good work. And yet a large percentage of the students are going to get 100% or very close to 100%. Then there's a kind of rapid fall away, and there's some students who just don't care, who don't put the work in, don't make submissions on time, can't benefit from any feedback and so on, and end up with quite poor marks. But for that group which during the course of any term put in the work, understand what the rubric, what the brief is asking them to do in terms of the computer project, and care about it enough to pay attention to detail, of course they can get 100%. And then an exam is quite a useful measure of the difference between what a student can do with the help of others, other students and myself, and what they can do on their own. So between a term mark and an exam, there is usually about 5 to 10% drop off. So under pressure of time, when you cannot ask other people how to do this or that, normally there's about a 10% drop off, which I think is quite normal in all subjects. Certainly as an English teacher, about 10% was about right. And I think it's very useful to kind of spot and helps you identify which students are able to do things on their own after being able to practice them and submit them and work on them, during the term. So I do believe that exams can be useful. But how do you overcome this level of stress and the fact that sometimes students totally mess up, and then it's not a true reflection either? So one of the first things that I did was to change an examination proper, held under strict examination conditions, to an examination equivalent. And that largely means very often it can be taken outside of the exam period, it can be done in class, and can be a lot more informal. So you can set it up in such a way as to take a lot of the sting out of it. You can make sure that the atmosphere is much more relaxed, that students have technical support on hand, and if anything does go wrong, then the exam can be extended. So I had an examination session a few weeks ago in which things did go horribly wrong. The whole network basically collapsed, and we had to extend the exam by quite a bit. And I had to make judgment calls on how long would be fair to extend it. In a kind of formal exam session where the rules are much stricter, that's a lot more difficult to police and a lot more difficult to enforce. It also means that I can invigilate my own exams. So rather than have other teachers who can't use judgment calls on when to answer a question that a student might have. What's the difference between a question where a student is fishing for how to do something within a computer application, as compared to something where there are often kind of network problems which cause that kind of issue, and because you are aware of that, you can discreetly help them out rather than having them penalized for some silly little thing that they didn't necessarily know or might not have encountered before. So I think it's very important to any kind of computer exam should be a lot more relaxed, because there are technical issues that can go wrong, and there are things that can happen which put anyone off their stride. I think the other good thing that having it as an exam equivalent rather than a formal exam allows you to do is to publish the paper ahead of time. So students have a week or two to look over the paper to make sure that they are able to do everything that is in the paper. They can practice the skills beforehand, and then they come in on the day and do it. So very much like a driving test. You know exactly what it is that you're going to have to do, but you do need to turn up on the day and actually produce the goods. But I think that takes a lot of the stress out of the situation. Students feel well prepared, and the vast majority of them do go over the paper, do make sure that they can do everything that's in the paper, and do well. I think it is important to have as open-ended a question as possible for this type of exam. Because you're giving people the paper ahead of time, they can kind of plan and they can practice it, so that when they produce, they are putting forward all the skills that they have learnt in a particular application, rather than, it's not about you trying to catch a student out. Do you know how to do this particular thing? If you don't, I'm sorry, I have to fail you. It becomes, show us how you've mastered this particular application. Put your best foot forward and let's see your skills. And I think that leads to a lot more enjoyment for students in writing that kind of paper. And I think it allows you to see what students can produce. And just looking at this extract from a mark book, quite at random, I think you can see that during term mark, there's a percentage of students who get 100% because they put the time and effort in during the term. There is also a percentage of students who get very low marks, like 33%, 44%, and so on, even that 0%. These are students who are just simply not handing in work. They're not, there are a variety of reasons, and the term marks have not yet been finalized, so some of this will be clawed back. But you can see that those students, generally speaking, need the exam to bring those marks up. And you can see that the exam is actually benefiting them. The other way around, they don't lose too much. Just to finish off, looking at an example of students' work, they were asked to put together an invitation to a ball, a social function, using Photoshop. And you can see the student here not only has used transparency, obviously all the layers in Photoshop, imported several images, but they've also taken the time to add the party hats onto everyone in the photograph. So I don't know how long that took them, but it went above and beyond a kind of examination question, and I think captures the spirit of what it is when you make it into an exam equivalent. It's a project which is done under time controls, under controlled conditions, but it can be fun. So to sum up, I think using an exam equivalent, which has more open-ended questions, where students have time to see the paper ahead of time and to prepare their skills, and where the questions are quite open-ended. So you're saying to the student basically, let's see what you can do. Let's see what skills you can bring to the table, and then assessing them on that is highly effective. I think it gives a quite accurate measure together with the term mark. I mean, you could see those students who, for whatever reason, were not doing well during the term, possibly because they weren't motivated enough, or there might be any number of reasons for that, do have an opportunity to pitch up on the day of the exam and say, I can do this stuff. And then you have students who put in the time, the effort and the care to achieve everything perfectly during term time, able to get help from any source, and maybe their mark isn't quite as good under controlled conditions, but it certainly holds up and shows that those skills are solid, and in that Vygotskian sense, you have an accurate measure of the difference between what you can do socially with the help of other people and what you can do on your own. So I'm a great believer in the exam equivalent. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel, like, share, make comments, and please hit that notification bell so that you never miss another episode again.